right, hello there, thrill seekers. My wife was playing the chords for Elliott Smith's song Say Yes on the ukulele yesterday, and then this morning I started playing the same chords on guitar, and then I started playing them kind of wrong, and that's Elliott Smith's Say Yes kind of wrong. Maybe that's what we'll call it. So, I just got back from Hokyoji, and boy, are my arms, legs, and everything else tired. So I thought I'd like to tell you about that. Okay, so last week I was at Hokyoji, which last week when I was telling people that I was going there, I called it a Zen monastery, and I talked to Dokai Georgeson, who is the director there, and I'm not sure if what his title is, but he seems to run the place. And he said he doesn't think of it as a monastery, but it's not exactly not a monastery, so it's sort of it's something. It's like a Zen place. So this is technically it is in a place called 8 Zen, funny name, Minnesota. Not Frostbite Falls, Minnesota, but 8 Zen, Minnesota, probably close to Frostbite Falls. And it is 8 Zen is, I don't know if I ever even saw 8 Zen. I saw a town, the nearest sort of town is New Albin, which I believe is in Wisconsin or Iowa. I don't think it's even in Minnesota. So this place sits in an area where Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin all come together. So the nearest sort of city is La Crosse, Wisconsin. And it's 3 hours drive south of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So it's way out there in the middle of the plains and hills of Minnesota. Pretty far from human civilization. It's probably not quite as remote as Tassajara. Tassajara, you have to kind of go from the nearest sort of anything like where normal people live from Tassajara. You have to drive an hour up and down a mountain on this kind of rocky road. For Hokyoji, it's maybe 10 minutes on a similar sort of road from the nearest kind of civilization. 10 minutes? Well, maybe more than 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Anyway, it's out there. So you're pretty much separated from civilization. I first went to Hokyoji, I'm not even sure, 12 maybe years ago, 13, 14 years ago, I'm not sure, for a summer retreat called Great Sky, which was organized by Tonin O'Connor and Zuiko Redding, I believe, two women priests or monks or Zen people from that area. I think Tonin is from Milwaukee, at least that's where she lives, and Zuiko is from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So I went there for that thing, and I hadn't been back there since. I went twice to Great Sky, and then I haven't been back there since. And it was real interesting, so I thought I'd tell you what the deal was, because I don't think anybody, I kept announcing it and saying, you can come and show up. I don't think anybody came and showed up based on the announcements that I made, although a few people from this watching me on YouTube came via Zoom to see me give a talk on Sunday. So I arrived there on... let's see, I guess it must have been Sunday, and pretty much late in the day, and everybody there at Hokyoji was watching the Super Bowl. So that was kind of interesting. You had a bunch of Zen monks sitting around eating pizza and watching the Super Bowl. And I haven't seen the Super Bowl. The last Super Bowl I saw was the one where Janet Jackson exposed herself or got exposed accidentally. I remember watching that and going, that's not an accident. That was planned out. I mean, it was so obviously planned out and choreographed. But anyway, that's the last Super Bowl I remember seeing. So that was historic. And then the one the other week was historic because it went into overtime. I don't know nothing about football, but I guess that's real unusual for a game, the Super Bowl game, to go into overtime. So that was kind of interesting. And we started in earnest the next day. The next day started in the evening to give people who were coming in time to arrive. But I actually went and sat in the zendo a few times during the day. And then the first sort of official formal sitting was, I believe we had a dinner together first, and then we sat for the evening sit and then went to bed. So the next day, which would be the Tuesday, is when the sort of, Dokai called it the practice period schedule. So originally I was supposed to go there for what they called a sesshin, which is not a session. A lot of people think that they're hearing the word session, but it's actually a Japanese word, sesshin, which means something like cleaning the mind. And at the last minute, Dokai decided it wouldn't be a sesshin schedule, it would be a practice period schedule. I never saw the sesshin schedule, so I don't know how different it was, but I'll tell you what the schedule we followed was. We got woken up at 6 in the morning, which is a leisurely time by Zen standards. For Japanese Zen, the kind of standard time in both Rinzai and Soto to be woken up for Zen training is 3:30 in the morning. My teacher Nishijima Roshi was an iconoclast and wild man because he woke us up for our retreats at 4:30 in the morning, and people thought, "Oh wow, that's so crazy! You're letting him sleep in that late." But we slept all the way till 6, which, is for normal people, that's still early. It's not crazy early, but early enough. And at 6:30, the Zazen began. So at 6:30, we sat a round of Zazen, followed by 10 minutes of Kinhin, which is a kind of walking meditation. You're supposed to continue your Zazen mind while walking very, very slowly around the zendo together. Then back to Zazen again. Then that was another half an hour, and then there's a service in which incense is offered by the person called Doshi. Doshi, I don't know what Doshi translates to, but I always think of it as sort of the practice leader, something like that. Incense is offered by that person, and then we chanted together. Let's see. I don't know the name of this chant. Maybe I'll look it up and I'll see if I can. If I have looked it up and successfully found it, I'll put the name on the screen. And if you're not seeing anything on the screen, it means I couldn't find the name of this chant. But it is the chant of let's see. It goes, "All my ancient twisted karma, born from body, speech, and mind, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, I now fully avow." I think maybe I messed that up. Maybe it's "All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born from body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow." Anyway, so you chant that 3 times with bows at various points in the chant. And then we chanted the Bodhisattva vow, which is, "Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Let's see, the Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it." There's various different translations in English, and I've gone to different places, and all of them get kind of mixed up in my mind, so that's why I'm a little bit hesitating by saying this. I think that was pretty close to the version we chanted at Hokyoji, maybe a word or two off. And then we chanted, "I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, and I take refuge in Sangha," with a little kind of little refrain, which I've never learned, that they chant after each one. So I take refuge in Buddha, blah, 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 blah. I take refuge in Dharma, blah, 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 blah. I take refuge in Sangha, blah, 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 blah. I never learned the blah, blah, blah part, so I can't tell you what it was. Maybe I'll learn it for a future video and then tell you what it was. And then that was followed by the recitation of the Heart Sutra. So that was kind of interesting to me because normally the Heart Sutra is chanted. And what I'm used to doing is chanting it in what's called Sino-Sanskrit, which is, a lot of people think that it is Japanese because it's kind of the way they do it in Japan, but it's not Japanese. It is Chinese as pronounced by Japanese people, but it's not even really Chinese because it's a Chinese rendition of Sanskrit. So it's its own thing. So it's kanji zaibo satsugyojin hanya hara mitaji shoken goan kaiku do isaiku yakushari shi. So it's like that. They actually recite it in English, so it's more like you get together and go Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, while deeply practicing Prajnaparamita, clearly saw that all five skandhas are empty and thus relieved all suffering and distress. So they chant it, or they recite it instead of chanting it. There's bows and stuff, and then you get to go have breakfast. And breakfast is done in a style they call oroki. And a Japanese person once translated the word oroki for me as adequate amount bowls, which is the key. The key means it's more general than bowls, but in this case we're talking about bowls. And ryo is amount, and o is like honorary. So it's kind of adequate amount bowls is a pretty good translation. So you get this set of bowls that are tied up in this kind of little hanky thing, and then there's chopsticks and spoon and stuff in that, and you chant a bunch of stuff basically before you open this thing up. Maybe I'll do a special, instead of going into it right now, I'll do maybe a special oroki video one of these days. You chant a bunch of stuff, then you open it up, and then they come along and serve you stuff in your three bowls that you now have sitting in front of you. And often this is done in the zendo, but at Hokyoji they go and do it in another room that's adjacent to the kitchen to kind of make everything run a little bit smoother, because otherwise you have to like run everything out from the kitchen over to the zendo, which in Hokyoji's case is kind of a hike. I mean, it's not a bad walk or anything, but if you're carrying a bunch of food and there's snow and ice on the ground, it's probably not a great thing to do. So they do it in the room adjacent to the kitchen. And in Japan, oroki in the three bowls is always rice in the first bowl, miso soup in the second bowl, and a kind of a takuan, which is kind of a pickle, in the third bowl. And in Nishijima Roshi's retreats, you get a fourth bowl with some vegetables and tofu and stuff in it. In the case of Hokyoji, we just got three bowls, and they changed the meal. This was kind of an exciting surprise for me, because I'm not used to it being done that way. In the retreats I've done in Japan, it was the same meal every day. The vegetable dish would change, but it was always rice, miso soup, and pickles, and then they'd give you and the vegetable dish would change in Japan, but not very much. It was just sort of a slight variation on the same theme of chopped vegetables and tofu. But at Hokyoji, they gave us, I think, a couple of times in the first bowl, we got fried eggs with cheese. So it was vegetarian, but not vegan. And then the second bowl was, I believe, always some kind of soup, some kind of miso soup, but much more exciting miso soup than I'm used to in Japan. Because the miso soup in Japan usually is just miso with hot water and maybe some onions and things floating in it, but nothing much. But they put like broccoli and mushrooms and stuff. Sometimes different stuff was in the miso soup. And then the third bowl would usually be some kind of vegetables. Although one day, which was a big shock for me, the first bowl was cereal, some kind of healthy cereal, some kind of healthy flake cereal. I'm not sure what it was. And then the second bowl was, I think, kefir, that kind of yogurt stuff. I thought at first it was milk, but then when I tasted it, I realized it was thicker than milk. So I think it was kefir, that kind of yogurt, thin yogurt stuff. And then the third bowl was like a granola. And so you were supposed to mix that all up and eat it. So you have your meal, and everything's done in silence. There's, except for the chants. And after you finish your meal, they come and give you hot water to clean your bowl. So you put hot water in the first bowl, and then you pour the water into the second bowl and clean it, and you pour the water into the third bowl and clean it. I'm making this very simplified. And then you wipe it all off and you wrap it up, and there's some more chanting, and then you're done. So after breakfast, there was a little bit of free time, and then the first day we sat 3 more rounds of zazen, and then that was what was done then. every other day except for the first day, after the break, we would get together and have what they called chosen, which is something I was not familiar with. When I first saw the word chosen written on the schedule, I'm like, what's chosen? And chosen is kind of a discussion period. And thinking back, that's kind of what Nishijima Roshi did in Japan. He never called it chosen. At least I never heard him call it chosen. But we would also do a similar thing where he would bring a lecture, and he always did the same lecture every retreat for each of the 3 lecture periods that he would do during retreats. He'd do it differently each year, but basically the same stuff. But here we were studying this, which is this thing that they printed up specially for the retreat, so don't try to find it in stores, but it's called Taking Care of Karma, and it is a compilation of talks given by the founder of Hokyoji and the founder of the, I keep wanting to say Milwaukee, Minneapolis Zen Center, which is Dainin Katagiri Roshi. That's him there. That's his picture. And it contains a lot of his talks about karma. And if you are interested, all of the stuff that is in this book, you can't get this book, but all the stuff that's in the book is available on this website, which if you're looking at the screen, you can see it. It's katagiritranscripts.net. I'll let you figure out how to spell Katagiri, Katagiri, transcripts.net. And if you go there, all the stuff comes from there, but it's not organized into subject and stuff. They just came out with the stuff. And this was, by the way, put together by Kikan Michael Howard, who was one of, I'm not sure if Michael Howard was a direct student of Katagiri Roshi or somebody who came along later, but what he has been doing for the last few years is going through the tapes that they made of Katagiri Roshi's talks and transcribing them and putting them up on this website, katagiritranscripts.net, which has tons of material from Katagiri Roshi's talks. So we would read there was a leader of the Chosen would read passages from this, and for the first 10 minutes, and then we'd kind of chat about it and talk about what we thought it meant to us and so forth. So after that was another short break for, I don't think quite an hour, maybe like 40 minutes or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe an hour-ish. And then more Zazen, another round of Zazen, followed by another little service, and that second service was chanting the Enmeijuku Kanangyo and Daihi Shindarani, which I'm going to have to look up and tell you what they are, but they're basically chants that are done in Buddhist temples to kind of, the word pray is kind of, I'm going to use it loosely, but sort of to pray for the well-being of people who are either sick or who have recently died. So you chant these 2 chants, and then after it, the chant leader reads off the names of the sick people, and then next reads off the names of the recently deceased people, and that's who the chant is dedicated to. After that, lunch, which is served in the same way that I just told you about breakfast, and then you get another little break of an hour or so, followed by a work period. And then the work periods at this particular retreat were actually pretty easy. I understand that sometimes in the winter retreats at Hokyoji, because it's very rural and it's Minnesota, sometimes you're spending the entire work period clearing out snow. Well, we didn't get much snow. We got just like a little bit, like half an inch of snow. Maybe less than half an inch. But so there wasn't any snow to clear out. So the workload was pretty easy. I ended up sweeping out the dining room once, and then 2 other days I was cleaning the kitchen. And then one day Dokai was like, he couldn't think of anything for me to do, basically. He said, "Oh, go work on your talk," because I was going to have to talk on Sunday. So that's what I did for my work period one of those days. I also was sitting extra periods of Zazen here and there during the free periods. I just thought I'd mention that. I used to do that when I was with Nishijima's group, and I did that again when I was at Hokyoji, because it was freezing cold and you couldn't even go take a walk or anything, so I'd go and do more Zazen. So after the work period, there's another little break for like an hour or so, I think, and then back to the Zendo for another round of Zazen, followed by, Was there a brief service? I think there was a brief service after that one, but pretty short. Can't remember what we chanted after that one. Sorry, I'll go look it up, and one of these days I'll tell you. And then dinner. So dinner, okay, in the old days, monks were supposed to only eat before noon. So that you had breakfast and lunch, but no dinner. When Buddhism got to China, that's when they first started serving dinner, but it wasn't exactly dinner. They had to kind of, to try to honor the Indian way of doing things, they would call it sometimes medicine bowl or something, but they wouldn't do the formal chants, like the formal oroki, and that's what we followed at Hokyoji. It was a silent dinner, but without the oroki style. You basically just went up and served yourself and ate in silence. Followed by another short break, and then 2 more rounds of zazen. And then they did this interesting sort of evening service, which I'd never seen before. They read a couple of pages from the Pali Canon, which is early Buddhist stuff. And then they had this little chant, which I wish I could remember, but it was basically kind of a good night chant. It's like, now that I am going to sleep, I vow with all beings to have pleasant dreams and peace and calm, or something like that. I didn't get a copy of it, so I can't tell you what it was. And then everybody's like bowing down on their mats, and the chant leader says good night, and everybody else says good night. Oh, there's also this little thing where somebody has to go out in the freezing cold and knock on a piece of wood called a han and yell, what's the thing? It's like, time passes swiftly, use your time wisely, awaken, awaken, and as if he's yelling it to the people, but we're so far away, I'm sure there's nobody could hear the chant other than those of us in the Zendo, or that little shout. And then we go to sleep, and then do it all over again the next day. So, yeah, what did I get out of it? Oh, then I gave a talk on Sunday, and some of you saw that, and if it's archived, maybe I'll get a copy and put it up on this video channel one of these days. I don't think it was spectacular, but it wasn't too bad. So that's what I did. And that's kind of a pretty standard Zen retreat, in America. That's it's not too different from the schedule we follow when I do my retreats in Finland, England, and Germany every year. So I was kind of used to the schedule. One thing that was nice for me is when I'm in Europe, I often get a fairly large group, and I have to spend most of my time doing dokusan, which is private meetings with individual students. But this group was only 8 people including me and Dokai. So I guess 6 people other than us, right? And so I did Dokusan one of the days on the Saturday with actually one person didn't sign up, so I did Dokusan with 5 people, I think. Anyway, so that's what I did, just one of those days. And for me, it was great. I had a lot of difficulty getting there. The planes were all messed up, and then getting home, oh my God. One of the planes I was on, the first plane I was on supposed to go back, had mechanical trouble, which means I missed my connection. So I was connecting in Dallas to go back to California, but I missed that connection, so they had to give me a voucher for a hotel overnight, and I didn't even get to the hotel till like midnight, and they didn't give me my luggage, so I didn't have anything, so that was lousy. And then I had to get up at 5 in the morning or about 6 in the morning to catch a plane back to California. So that was not my favorite way of spending a night, especially when I hoped to be home with my wife and Ziggy that night, but didn't make it there. But being at Hokyoji itself was great. I feel like I've gone on too long. Maybe I'm going to have to make this a 2-part video, because I feel like now this is too long for me to give my kind of impressions of what I got out of being in Hokyoji, which is what I intended to do. So how about I just leave it at that, and then I'll do another video tomorrow where I will talk about what it's like, kind of personal impressions of what a retreat is like. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. All right. So until next time, if you want to send me donations for more bad plane travel and such like, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is my main way of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye.
Hey, Ziggy, how you doing? Ziggy was so happy when I came home. He booped me like 5 times in a row when he first saw me, which I think booping for him is like embarrassing or something. He doesn't seem to like to do it, but he knows I like it, so he does it. So he's happy. I know he just looks like a sleepy dog in his doggy bed like always, but it's a rainy day out and he's kind of groggy. So we'll let him be. All right, bye, Ziggy.